Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Executive Table Talk. This is the show. Let's try that again. This is the show that brings executives to you to help you solve some of the biggest problems out there in the workplace. Today, we're going to be talking about how to set up a proper budget. So the idea from this came about where I was in our Work a Daily career coaching platform, and we had some members saying that they were being asked to build budgets in some new jobs they've taken on, and they'd never done it before. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity to have our panel of experts come on and really talk about the fundamentals of setting a budget, because if you've never set a budget before, it can feel difficult. You don't know where to start. I remember the first time I was asked to set a budget in a leadership role, I was completely confused. I didn't know how to pull the numbers out of thin air. So with that in mind, I'm very excited. We've got two veterans to our show here with me today. Hello, Lisa and Michael. How are you both doing?
Hi there. Good. Thank you.
So, Lisa, I'm going to start with you. You're a global marketing executive. I mean, setting budgets is just a natural part of your practice, but I'm sure you remember back in the day, the first time you had to set a budget. It's a little daunting, right?
Yeah. Thank you. As you said, as a brand marketing executive, I've done this for years, and a well-planned marketing budget, is critical to strategically allocating resources, to outlining a successful strategy, and maximizing your return on investment. And creating that budget can seem daunting, but it shouldn't be. And as I've said, I've done this for years, and to effectively develop that marketing budget that I've done, I'm going to give you some tips to align with the company goals and drive tangible results. And so the first thing I want to tell you is define your goals and objectives. Don't dive right into developing a budget. For me, what I've done in the marketing world is, what is that? Is it to drive awareness, conversions, loyalty? If it's driving awareness, that could be an advertising campaign. If it's driving conversion, that could be a targeted email or social media campaign. Understanding your goals and objectives is going to guide your budget allocation. So it's critical to do that step first. Next, you want to conduct analysis and research. Analyze your historical data and conduct research. It's going to be valuable in the budget planning process. For me, what I've done is I've looked at my past marketing performance campaigns to see what's worked, what hasn't worked, what can I tweak, what can I replicate, and what should I sunset. This is also a time to conduct research. Take a look at your market trends, look at your consumer behaviors, look at your competitive analysis. This is going to inform your budget allocation. Next, this is the critical part: develop a plan. Why? Because you are going to define your strategies and your tactics during this phase. And you want to do it before you define your budget. Because once you define your tactics, you can start researching the cost for these tactics. Let me give you an example. Say you've got this amazing idea, and then you go and you find out it's 500,000, and you know that's not going to fly. You got to go back to the drawing board to say, okay, what are some other ideas? What are some other tactics I can use to achieve my goal? Which leads into my next point: estimate your cost. When submitting your budget, for approval, you want to accurately forecast how much you think you're going to spend, because once it's approved, that becomes your budget. So you want to look at industry benchmarks, you want to get quotes, you want to talk with your team about accurate estimates. And now it's time to develop your budget, right? So you want to set a realistic budget. You want to base it based on financial resources, revenue projections, and the estimates that you've pulled together. And last, you want to monitor and adjust. You want to regularly monitor and evaluate your budget, and you want to optimize your budget for maximum impact. Setting up a proper budget based on careful planning, data analysis, and understanding your goals is going to set you up for success.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Such a great point. I think I really liked your point about, don't just come up with the idea without first making sure you can afford it. It's such an obvious thing, but a lot of people who've never done this before don't realize, right, that you've got to back yourself into your numbers for sure.
Right.
Michael, you worked in the NFL. You've been in finance and operations. I mean, you're all about budgeting. You've talked about this multiple times before on the show. What's your advice for setting proper budgets?
This is my favorite time of the year. I love the budget process period. I love this time of year, even though it's an ongoing time of the year. But I do love this time of year. For me, a budget is a living, breathing document, and I'm going to explain more on that later. But it's just that it's not something that you put all this effort into and you put it away in the file cabinet, and then you look at it at the end of the year and see how we did. But I said I'll explain more on that later. I have a process that I follow. I keep a folder, a budget folder that I have, and all my conversations and everything, the notes, and I go around to different the leaders and I ask them what they're going to do for this upcoming year. But my first step is that my bosses say, we're keeping the numbers flat. We're not doing anything different. So keep the budget to the flat, to the actual. Whatever we spend this year is what we're going to spend next year. So, okay. But I still go around to each of the department heads and find out, what are they doing? Are there any one-offs? Is there anything that we did this year that we're not doing next year? So there may be something in the budget that's in this year that was in the actuals that I'm going to take out. That it's a one-time thing, so I'll take that out. Another thing is, the second thing is, when I worked in football operations, I worked with the game officials and the replay officials, and they have a 7-year, it's called a CBA. They have an agreement between their union and the NFL where 76% of our budget is just related to their salary costs and all the things, their expenses. So that's 76% of the budget that I have no control over. It's something that we have to do. It's nailed down with a contract. So I have no control. So the only control I have is at 24%. So then once that's done, once I have all those numbers calculated, my boss sits down with finance and they go over things. They go over ins and outs and things. And once they agree on where the budget is going to be, my boss sits down with the commissioner. And just as Mark mentioned, Taylor mentioned a couple of weeks ago about a one-pager, this is when I do the one-pager. This is when I set up a one-pager for my boss, because the commission doesn't have time to go through pages and pages of ins and outs. He just wants to know what changed. So what I do is on the top of the page, I have the what we spent last year. So what we actually spent last year, the actual, and on the bottom is what we're going to spend for our budget, and everything in the middle there is the actual changes. So we're talking high level changes. I mean, a couple $100,000 or more, something changed or something we're not doing one way or the other. And then that's what changes. And also each month we have a forecast each month where let's say the commissioner, there's something that once the budget is closed, once the budget is locked, the budget can't be changed. But during the season, sometimes something come up. It could be a safety issue. So the commissioner say, we want to buy this kind of equipment. Now, we don't wait till the next budget comes out. He wants to do it now. So what we do is we run a forecast and we go ahead and put that through. So a lot of times the finance folks want to see the minutes from the meeting. They just don't take your word for it that we have to add something to the budget. They say, okay, well, show me the minutes of the meeting where he says he wants to buy it. So we show them and that's it. So finally, the final stage is the living and breathing part. Once I have the budget approved and the commissioner's seen it and he approved it, I take the budget and then I calendarize the budget. I take our budget and I calendarize it over 12 months. So I slice out the 12 months and say, okay, when are we going to spend this money? So it doesn't make sense. Not everything is straight line across. I mean, because it doesn't make sense, because sometimes things that are for the football season is not going to be spent during the off season. So I put in, when are we going to spend the money? So I can look quarterly or monthly if I want to. I can look quarterly and kind of kick the tires and say, are we on budget? Are we on point? I can do some analysis as far as how we're pacing ourselves as far as last year to this year. So a budget is like I said, it's a living, breathing thing. It's what we use to guide ourselves all year long. Thank you.
What a beautiful explanation of how that gets done.
Thank you.
Because, there's so many, I love that you talked about it being a living, breathing document. It's, there's a reason for you're building the budget so that throughout the year you're making these informed decisions. And I love that you said in the very beginning that, if they say we're going to do the same thing as last year, you still go in and quiz them
Yes.
trying to figure out what's going on there, right? Because
Absolutely.
doing the same thing as last year, like what if costs have changed? Like I can see where it's very important that somebody like you comes in and asks a lot of questions to help them clarify and maybe discover areas in which they don't realize the budget needs to change, right? So
Right. Absolutely.
fantastic stuff there. Folks, if you're interested in asking some questions, we're talking about how to design a proper budget, how to build a proper budget with several of our experts here from executive experts from Worky Daily. I have a question for both of you. Are there technologies or tools that are just kind of standard when you're working with budgets? Like, I'll start with you, Michael. Like, what are some of the things that you just have to use to create a budget these days, do you think?
For me, I use an Excel spreadsheet. I have a spreadsheet that I use, and it links. I kind of, with formulas and things of that way. It links. So, and like I said, I have things that are coming in from the prior year, and having a this year versus the budget, and I have whether it's plus or minus on the side. So I have another column, the difference, and then I can go through and summarize and make assumptions and things of that nature. But yeah, I use an Excel spreadsheet. It's not fancy, but it is a micro. I use micros and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a system. Some people may go out and buy a certain system, a budgeting package or something. No, it's not that fancy.
Ah, I love it. I love it. And what about you, Lisa? Is there special technology that gets used in the marketing world?
Good old-fashioned Excel document, and then sharing on drives and locking out what can be changed by who, giving those rights, because the last thing you want is somebody coming in and just messing up your budget that you've spent. As Michael so eloquently put, a living, breathing document. You do not want somebody going in and just messing that up. So you've got to make sure you've got the rights protected to key individuals.
I agree. It's funny that you say that. Somehow I got on the Excel side of TikTok, and there are people showing all these hacks, but I love it because they don't tell their boss. So their boss thinks that project's going to take them 2 hours, and they do it in 2 minutes with Excel, and then they just keep themselves busy for 2 hours. I was like, oh my goodness. That's when you know you're behind with technology for sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So when you think about budgeting, could either of you tell a story of a time where budgeting really, saved your company? Like it helped you recognize that you were overspending, or helped you predict that there were going to be some changes, or maybe make some savings? I don't know. I'd love to hear some budgeting stories, because I think even now people go, "Why? Like, I'm a small business. Why do I need one?" You need one. They're like, it's very powerful to have this data and to try to follow along with a plan. But I'm curious if you have stories, and if you don't, that's okay. But I'd be curious.
Yeah, I do have a story. I mean, I like to, like I said at the very end of my speech, was I like to calendarize my budget, because sometimes finance will miscode something, and something gets put into your numbers, and you're like, where did this come from? So I like to calendarize my budget, so I know. But you have to know your budget. You have to know your budget to the standpoint of, when are we going to spend this money? So if there's something that you're looking at either monthly or quarterly, and it doesn't make sense, something must have gotten miscoded, then you can maybe dive in deeper and say, why did we spend this? It doesn't make sense. We wouldn't be spending money. And then sure enough, something got miscoded. Finance miscoded something. It got in your numbers, and it should be someplace else. So, but yeah, I like to calendarize my budget. That way I know I have control over what's going on, and when. Now, it could be a timing issue. Maybe I thought something will be spent by, you got January, February, March. It'll be in by March, expense by March. Well, let's say the bill didn't come in until April. So everything's fine, just a timing issue. Yeah. But I like to have a calendarized budget. It keeps me in control of what's going on. Also, I mentioned pacing. I like to see last year's number versus this year's number to see how we're pacing. And also, I can predict the end of the year. I can let my boss know that yes, we're on budget. If we're over budget, I can tell them why. I know why and where it is. And if the commissioner wanted something, or something had to be done, I can explain that. It's very easy to explain.
Love it. Great stuff. What about you, Lisa?
Well, in marketing, it's always a rush. I need something in a day or two. And it's always, what are we going to cut and what are we going to add? So you have to have scenarios A, B, C at your beck and call constantly. So as you develop a plan, and that plan gets, that budget plan gets approved, you need to be ready constantly throughout the year. And as you can see over the pandemic, people had to shift budgets constantly, right? And then coming out of the pandemic as well. So you have to be ready to flex, whether your business takes off or it declines. So what does that look like? What do we need to cut immediately, and where are the priorities, and how does that look like, and how's that going to affect my revenue? Or what are some areas we can invest in? And you've got to be ready, at least in the marketing world, to come up with those scenarios, those budgeting scenarios rather quickly, in a day or two.
I love it. Yeah. It's funny. I sit on boards, and I'm sure some of you do too. And, when you're on a board, whether it's nonprofit or whatnot, we look at budgets, and it's calendarized, as you talked about, Michael. And that's always been super helpful for me, because you're going along. Whoa, what is that number? Why is that 10 times the size that it's been the last 7 months? What's happened there? And it allows us to have more meaningful discussion, not accusatory, but get to the bottom of it, so that if something's happening that doesn't continue, right, that cost goes on, we can maybe figure out a solution. So I've always found budgeting really helpful for recognizing these shifts in what's happening, because it never stays the same, does it? It's constantly changing. It's always some kind of snafu that throws it. And by the flip side, I'm on an HOA association budget meeting, and we saw places where we saved money. And that was really exciting. Like, sometimes you're like, ooh, great windfall. Let's see, where can we use that someplace else? So folks, if you've never done budgeting before, it really is great. There are a lot of free YouTube videos and resources out there just to start to familiarize yourself with it. But hopefully today we've really made the case for this.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
So I have a question here from Dale. Dale says, would it be possible to talk about starting out with systems or programs one might set up to reconcile purchases with a bank statement and batch those items into budget groups? That's interesting. So when you're getting financial data, how does that get dropped into Excel, or do you all use something different for your data to get dropped into Excel? How does that work?
Well, finance has a course, a financial package, and they have the budget in that package. So once the budget's finished, they put it. So when it comes to bank statements and other programs, they have the budget into their program. But the budget I have for the department is something that I kind of control on my own, as kind of a one-off to the side thing. And sometimes, your boss, or sometimes the commissioner will say, look, do you have any savings? So when I put the budget together, I kind of know where I have some savings. As far as I mentioned, the game officials, 76% of the budget is as far as in a CBA, as far as what we have to do. But sometimes they have meetings. They have we can budget 5 days for a meeting, but my boss says, look, I can finish the meeting in 3. So when we go travel and go to these meetings, we can save on, you're not going to save on the airfare, but you can save on the meeting fees we have to pay the officials. We can save on meals, costs at the hotel, the rooms, the AV equipment, and everything that's all the ancillary equipment we need for the meeting. So there are some savings that we can do some other things, but you have to know where they are.
Yeah, definitely. Lisa, what about you? Same thing?
Yeah, I think, as a small business, there are system packages that you could go out there and research that can, help you manage all of that. For me, I've been in companies where we have a finance department that pulls that together, and then I am looking at a budget and reconciling that to the financial statements of what they're doing, and looking at an overall P&L and saying, okay, based on the revenue projections that I've put together, how does that look from where we're off from the financials and the budget that I've put together? So it's kind of integrated with what I'm doing as an overall company and working with the finance and the sales. But I'm sure as a small business, there are programs out there that, can be readily available and easily incorporated now with so many management tools out there.
Yeah, I'm not personally endorsing them. I don't get compensated for them, but my business uses something called Indeniro, which is an online accounting and business practice. And we've used it for years. It batches everything. It puts it where it needs to be, builds out our budgets, P&Ls really nicely. So, but I think the key is to get started, folks. And if you're not familiar with building a budget, I think what you've learned here today is don't be shy about getting the answers, right? Because once you learn it, you're just going to build from there. So you don't need to know, you don't need to try to figure it out for yourself. Seek the knowledge of experts. We've had some very smart people on here today. Speaking of which, I just want to remind everyone that both Lisa and Michael are on LinkedIn. Please jot down their names. Please go ask them to connect right now. Make sure you tell them that you saw them on ETT. So customize your connection request. That way they'll know. But they are excellent people, excellent resources to follow here on LinkedIn, which I think is probably the biggest value of being on LinkedIn these days. It's a place for you to learn really important, timely information within your career, your industry, your skill set. There is no other place where you can be doing that in an ongoing basis. So these are two experts I would encourage you to follow.
And JT, I just wanted to add one other thing as a follow-up to what we were talking about is one thing that you could do really well is that there are just lots of financials is probably one of the top priorities in an organization, right? How are we doing? How are we tracking? How are we performing to revenue and overall sales? And the budget is a part of that. So the more detailed that you can be in terms of what changes, what's fluctuating, why, the reasons why, the more detailed that you can be on your budget, the better that you are in terms of prepared to answer any questions. You know, as you and Michael were talking about the month-to-month changes, the year-over-year changes, you've got to be very detailed in terms of why things are changing year-over-year, month-to-month, what got deleted, what got added. The better you are in terms of answering those questions throughout the organizations and to the board and to the chief officers and senior leaders in your organization.
I love that. Such a great point. Michael, any final thoughts on your end in this? What should people keep in mind?
Yes, keep in mind that, these spreadsheets, like JT said, you can build, and also Lisa said the same thing. You can build on these spreadsheets. Yeah, you may be working on a current year, but sometimes your boss may be looking for an outlook 3 to 5 years. So you can build, once you have a current year, you can, with an Excel spreadsheet, you can build out 3 years, 5 years. So you can kind of have some answers or answer some questions when it comes to long-term outlook, reaching outward. So those kind of things are you have to keep in mind when you build a budget, and just remember, go outward, go beyond the scope of the current year budget.
Yeah, and I'll just close by saying, remember, folks, you do the best you can when you're forecasting. Yes. Things are going to happen. Like, nobody's expecting the numbers you create to be the numbers. A budget is just a working model to help make business decisions. But that's, again, I just want to circle back that it's a living document, as Michael said. That's why you want to go back to it. That's what it's really there for, because the numbers will change. Like you said, it will evolve. Great stuff today, executives. You're amazing as always. Thank you to our audience for participating. Hopefully we'll see you back tomorrow for another Executive Table Talk. Remember, we host them Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, okay? And until next time, what do I tell you? If you want to win, you got to work it daily.
Work it daily.
Take care, my friends.
Thank you. Bye.